Hi everyone, it's me. I'm going to continue reading to you guys the next part of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Can any of you guys guess where I might be? Take a look around my background. Let's see what happens in the next part. We are on chapter 3. It's called Mr. Wonka and the Indian Prince. Prince Potticherry wrote a letter to Mr. Willy Wonka, said Grandpa Joe, and asked him to come all the way out to India to build him a colossal palace entirely out of chocolate. Did Mr. Wonka do it, Grandpa? He did indeed, and what a palace it was. It had 100 rooms and everything was made out of either dark or light chocolate. The bricks were chocolate, and the cement holding them together was chocolate, and the windows were chocolate, and all of the walls and the ceilings were made of chocolate, and so were the carpets, and the pictures, and the furniture, and the beds, and when you turned on the taps in the bathroom, hot chocolate came pouring out. When it was all finished, Mr. Wonka said to Prince Potticherry, "I warn you though, it won't last very long. You'd better start eating it all right away." "Nonsense!" shouted the prince. "I'm not going to eat my palace. I'm not even going to nibble on the staircase or lick the walls. I'm going to live in it." But Mr. Wonka was right, of course, because soon after this there came a very hot day with a boiling sun, and the whole palace began to melt. And then it sank slowly into the ground, and the crazy prince, who was dozing in the living room at the time, woke up to find himself swimming around in a huge brown sticky lake of chocolate. Little Charlie sat very still on the edge of his bed while staring at his grandfather. Charlie's face was bright and his eyes were stretched so wide you could see the whites all around. "Is all that really true?" he asked, "or are you pulling my leg?" "It's true," cried all four of the old people at once. "Of course it's true. Ask anyone you'd like." "And I'll tell you something else that's true," said Grandpa Joe, and now he leaned closer to Charlie and lowered his voice to a soft secret whisper. "Nobody ever comes out." "Out of where?" asked Charlie. "And nobody ever goes in." "In where?" cried Charlie. "Wonka's factory, of course." "Grandpa, what do you mean?" "I mean workers, Charlie." "Workers?" "All factories," said Grandpa Joe, "have workers streaming in and out of the gates in the mornings and evenings, except Wonka's. Have you ever seen a single person going into that place or coming out?" Little Charlie looked around slowly at each of the other four old faces, one after the other, and they all looked back at him. They were friendly, smiling faces, but they were also quite serious. There was no sign of joking or leg pulling on any of them. "Well, have you?" asked Grandpa Joe. I really don't know, Grandpa," Charlie stammered. "Whenever I walk past the factory, the gates seem to be closed." "Exactly," said Grandpa Joe. "Oh, but there must be people working in there." "Not people, Charlie. Not ordinary people, anyway." "Well, then who?" cried Charlie. "Aha! That's it. You see? That's another one of Mr. Willy Wonka's cleverness." "Charlie, dear," Mrs. Bucket called from out of where she was standing by the door, "it's time for bed. That's enough for tonight." "Oh, but Mother, I must hear." "Tomorrow, my darling." "That's right," said Grandpa Joe. "I'll tell you the rest of it tomorrow evening." All right, friends, we're on to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is called The Secret Workers. Do any of you guys know who the secret workers might be? Let's find out. The next evening, Grandpa Joe went on with his story. "You see, Charlie," he said, "not so very long ago, there used to be thousands of people working in Mr. Willy Wonka's factory. Then, one day, all of a sudden, Mr. Wonka had asked every single one of them to leave, to go home, and never to come back. "But why?" asked Charlie. "Because of spies." Spies? Yes, all the other chocolate makers, you see, had begun to grow jealous of the wonderful candies that Mr. Wonka was making, and they started sending in spies to steal his secret recipes. The spies took jobs in the Wonka factory pretending that they were ordinary workers, and while they were there, each one of them found out exactly how a certain thing was made. And did they go back to their own factories and tell? Asked Charlie. "Well, they must have," answered Grandpa Joe, because soon after that, Fickergrubbel's factory started making an ice cream that would never melt, even in the hottest sun. Then Mr. Prodnose's factory came out with a chewing gum that never lost its flavor, no matter how much you chewed it. And then Mr. Slugworth's factory began making candy balloons that you could blow up to huge sizes before you popped them with a pin and gobbled them up. And so on, and so on. And Mr. Willy Wonka tore his beard and shouted, "This is terrible! I shall be ruined. There are spies everywhere. I shall have to close my factory." "But he didn't do that," Charlie said. "Oh, yes, he did. He told all the workers that he was sorry, but they would have to go home. Then he shut the main gates and he fastened them with a chain. And suddenly, Wonka's giant chocolate factory became silent and deserted. The chimneys stopped smoking, the machines stopped whirling, and from then on, not a single chocolate or candy was made. Not a soul went in or out, and even Mr. Willy Wonka himself disappeared completely. Months and months went by," Grandpa Joe went on, "but still the factory remained closed, and everybody said, 'Poor Mr. Wonka, he was so nice, and he made such marvelous things, but he's finished now. It's all over.' Then something astonishing happened. One day, early in the morning, thin columns of white smoke were seen to be coming out of the top of the tall chimneys of the factory. People in the town stopped and they stared. 'What's going on?' they cried. 'Someone's lit the furnaces. Mr. Wonka must be opening up again.' They ran to the gates, expecting to see them wide open and Mr. Wonka standing there to welcome back his workers. But no. The great iron gates were still locked and chained as securely as ever, and Mr. Wonka was nowhere to be seen. 'But the factory is working,' the people shouted. 'Listen, you can hear the machines. They're all whirling again, and you can smell the smell of melting chocolate in the air.' Grandpa Joe leaned forward and laid a long, bony finger on Charlie's knee, and he said softly, 'But most mysterious of all, Charlie, were the shadows in the windows of the factory. The people standing on the street outside could see small, dark shadows moving behind the frosted glass windows.' 'The shadows of whom?' asked Charlie quietly, and here's a picture of Grandpa Joe and his bony finger. That's exactly what everybody else wanted to know. 'The place is full of workers,' the people shouted, 'but nobody's gone in. The gates are locked. It's crazy, and nobody ever comes out either.' But there was no question at all, said Grandpa Joe, that the factory was running. And it's gone on running ever since for these last 10 years. What's more, the chocolates and the candies it's been turning out have become more fantastic and delicious all the time.
And of course now, when Mr. Wonka invents some new and wonderful candy, neither Mr. Fickelgruber nor Mr. Prodnose nor Mr. Slugworth nor anybody else is able to copy it. No spies can get into the factory and find out how it is made. But Grandpa, who? Cried Charlie. Who is Mr. Wonka using to do all the work in the factory? Nobody knows, Charlie. But that's absurd. Hasn't someone asked Mr. Wonka? Nobody sees him anymore. He never comes out. The only things that come out of that place are chocolates and candies. They come out through a special trap door in the wall, all packaged and addressed, and they are picked up every day by the post office trucks. But Grandpa, what sort of people are they that work in there? My dear boy, said Grandpa Joe, this is one of the greatest mysteries of chocolate, of the chocolate-making world. We know only one thing about them. They're very small. The faint shadows that sometimes appear behind the windows, especially late at night when the windows are on, are those of tiny people, no taller than my knee. There aren't any such people, Charlie said. And just then, Mr. Bucket, Charlie's father, came into the room. He was home from the toothpaste factory, and he was waving the evening newspaper rather excitedly. Have you heard the news? He cried, and he held up the paper so that they could see the huge headline. And the headline said this: Wonka Factory to be opened at last to a lucky few. And I am going to show you the words that say the headline. That was on the front page of the headline. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 4. We will continue reading chapter 5 next. Chapter 5 is called The Golden Tickets. And you guys all say, done, done, done. Have a good day, guys. I'll see you later. Bye.